Hi, and welcome to this series of interviews with professional live sound engineers, giving their stories, advice and techniques to make you a better sound engineer. Tonight we have Andy Jackson, who is the monitor engineer for the Snuts. Andy, thanks for joining us for this chat. Just to start off, just tell us a wee bit more about yourself.
Oh, okay. So I have been an engineer for years. It actually wasn't my first choice of career, believe it or not. I left school and became an architectural technician. And then I got bored with that. And then joined the Air Force and got bored with that. And then went back to architecture and got bored with it again. And then ended up being a sound engineer.
Wow.
It's one of those things that, when you go to see the careers officer at school and whatnot, and they say, well, what do you want to be? And I was like, I want to be a sound engineer. And they were like, what? Nah, go and get a real job. So,
yeah, they didn't really
roundabout thing, crazy. But I got here in the end, so.
Cool. And your route was obviously, you didn't go studying or anything like that. How did you, was it a passion? Was it like, oh, you just love doing it? I mean, obviously you've got a bit of keyboard porn behind you, so you've got that, I know you love your synthesizers, but how did you get into developing to be a live sound engineer? Did you come from a studio background? Did you come from being a musician?
Kind of musician-y things, obviously, with these. That kind of introduced me to the whole sort of recording concept. I mean, I knew it had existed when I was younger, but you get these views of what you think it might be. But I used to see consoles and studios and things, and think, that's about all right. That let's get loads of knobs. Let's get more than my synth has got, kind of thing. Started out doing a bit here and there with Trevor Riley, if you remember, Big Trev, DJ Trev. He had a studio down near the Clydeside, underneath, what was that shop called now? So Roddy Stewart, Sound and Light, disco.
Uh-huh.
Remember that?
Uh-huh.
So that was a sort of first introduction to that kind of thing, and then the whole sort of different job career thing kicked in, and I was kind of doing it on and off, and it ended up, try to think now, when I actually did kind of start. I actually did go back to the SCE and did the audio engineering diploma.
All right.
And about 3 weeks before I was due to sit my exams, I got a phone call from a Horse McDonald.
Yeah.
Asking me to go out and look after her keyboard player's rig and playback rig. So that was the sort of first sort of tour that I did. It was just a UK tour. Just kind of keyboard teching, but looking out, obviously, seeing what was going on, sort of out front. Didn't have a monitor engineer at that time. So it's kind of, being in the SE side of things, it was more obviously the studio side. There was like nothing live at all. If it might have been a teensy-weensy thing.
Yeah. I hear that a lot about the courses, because I used to teach as well doing that at Stowe, and it's very studio-based. Your live sound engineer, very studio-based, all of it, but not a lot of experience in the live, and which kind of brings it up to subject. I mean, the difference between a studio engineer and a live engineer. I mean, what you'll get is most people who are listening to this will be a studio engineer who'll move into live. I think it's very rare that you move from live into studio. So what would you say is the biggest differences from going from studio to a live environment?
Well, with a live environment, if you've never done it before and you come from the recording studio side, I think a lot of people will find it difficult at first because you have to work very quickly, as you know. If you're working with an up-and-coming band, chances are you won't get any pre-production. So you won't have a console. You won't have anything, really. So you will just be, shoved in front of a console and you'll do the show. And as you know, you can't spend half an hour getting a snare drum or a kick drum sound. That just doesn't happen.
Well, we've done a few sound checks. We've seen that happen.
Yeah, we've also done a few sound checks. Complete sound checks in the time it would probably take somebody to do that half-hour thing.
And I think we both know the gig we're talking about that took 45 minutes for a kick drum from the touring engineer. If you remember, you were at Flint.
Yeah.
Slightly pulling your hair out.
Yes. I'm bald now, that's why.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, that's the thing, because I've witnessed it, especially when you get if we're at the garage or something, and you get a local band and they bring their local engineer who's cool, he's getting experience, but yeah, a lot of time it's came from a studio basis and you can see them dialing right in. But as you say to them, man, you've not got half an hour to muck about and get all these different sounds. You're and that's what I was trying to explain to a lot of people is, you've got you might think it's great if you're working in a big venue, like say we're in the garage and you've got the tour engineer, but then you've got the 3 supports to sound check in 45 minutes. Yeah. That's what you need to learn. It's the on the ball and doing it fast as.
That's it. It's like, I've always thought that in a crazy way you should learn to be a live engineer first. And then if you want to go to the studio, so be it. And the theory behind that is because you learn to work quickly, being a live engineer, that can translate, directly in to the studio environment, and you'll work quicker. And over time, you'll slow down, but, things like frequency recognition, miking techniques, the things that you learn when you're out live can directly kind of correlate, I think, so.
Also, the fact is, in the studio environment, you don't get the feedback. Your biggest pain when you're doing a live gig. It's, I
don't know. I've heard some guitar amps up so loud that the guy can't stand anywhere in the live room without it going mental. That's a good one.
I was in an AC/DC tribute band for 5 years, so the Angus Young, that's all he did. Didn't know how to sing.
Was that Craig?
No, that was before Craig. It was Angus. It was Graham before Craig.
Graham before Craig. They were good lads. I mixed them once up in a gig in what was it now? Kirkintilloch, a club they were playing up there.
Oh yeah.
It was was it Bliss or something?
Bar Bliss.
And it was just a kind of, can you go up and do the gig? And they were amazing. They were absolutely amazing.
When I played with them, and I used to manage them as well, we played in the actual bar before they opened Bliss, the nightclub, which was a decent sized venue. The bar literally was, 40 people you get maximum. And it was one of those gigs where you were playing with the singer and the first person was like that. And absolutely mental. Just still remember it being such a mental gig, but...
We've all done gigs like that, eh?
Oh, aye. The sweaty gigs.
I used to mix in Arta, if you remember that.
Oh, aye, yep.
Downstairs in the club, they had bands on, so they would have like a...
Really shallow stage?
Yeah, they would have like a... if you're looking at the stage, and on the sort of left-hand side would be at that time it was where the DJ booth was, and the engineer would be right in front of the DJ booth, and there would be a hole in the wall where we just poke everything through that we needed to poke through and come back through. sort of thing. Yeah, those were like sweaty gigs. That's why I think
I
I've
call
got.
that a glory hole in some of the.
I think that's why for years I had ringing in my ears, because I was like right next to like a hi hat and a crash cymbal.
Aye.
You know.
Well, that's
only
a lot of
only
drummers.
wish it was a left-handed drummer.
Drummers, your left ear, if you're a drummer, tends to go first because of snare and hi hats.
Yeah.
Because when I went to get my hearing checked last year, and the guy was saying, "What do you do?" and I was like, "Well, I was a drummer for 15 years professionally."
I listen for a living.
And then he said, "That's crazy," but he said my ears weren't that bad for being a drummer, but slightly on the left.
Wow.
Yeah, but I was one of those generations who grew up not wearing earplugs really when you're playing.
I must admit, I can't use them. I wish I could, but I can't. I always invariably end up taking them out. I just can't get used to that kind of what's going on, you know.
Well, that's a good subject, because I've seen a lot of people chatting about mixing with earplugs in, which I don't. Well, the only time I mix with earplugs in is if I'm doing monitors a lot of the time. But from front of house perspective, mixing with earplugs, I don't really agree with, because you can really screw with your balance of actually what you're hearing there.
I mean, I think even doing monitors wearing earplugs.
When I say earplugs, I mean my in-ears.
Oh, your ears are okay. Yeah. I have worked with quite a lot of people who wear plugs, you know, and they're using wedges, and the stage level is interstellar.
Aye.
Just, you know, because obviously trying to overcome the plug in the ear, you know, but
yeah, and we've all we've all done the gigs where you've got the ancient rockers who are all deaf as a post, and yeah, exactly. So in terms of monitoring and stuff, how do you see? What do you prefer, front of house or monitors?
monitors.
I'm the same.
I'm one of those crazy sadists that like monitors.
Why is that? Why?
Well, I just enjoy being on the stage, you know, and looking out and just seeing everything happening.
Yeah.
You know, and do you know when you get one of those gigs where everything clicks, and you know there's just a beautiful moment where you can look out and see it all, and you're looking across the stage, you know, and you're meeting eyes with the lead singer, for instance, and you know there's just a wee nod, and you know it does just everything's just happening, that kind of thing.
I totally agree with you. That's how I feel as well. It's also, I find the monitors can be a bit more of a challenge sometimes as well, because you know, if you're out front of house, you're mixing one mix, but you're on monitors, you can be up to 10, 14, whatever, you know, it's mixture of in-ears, and I think you have to be a lot more on the ball, and I enjoy that, the relationship with the musicians. But the amount of bands who have came through the venues, you know, and you end up getting a good rapport with them because of that. Because it's very hard if you're in front of house and you're a venue technician, you don't get as much relationship with the bands, because most of the time you're up front of house and don't come down and get a proper chat with them, you know.
Well, a case in point with that kind of thing, you know, doing the best that you can do every single gig, no matter what it is. And the Dunts played in the garage recently. Well, I say recently, last year. It might have been this year. Was it this year? I can't remember. I've completely lost it.
Gigs this year, mate.
And they were going to be playing SWG3, a massive gig for them, and they were like, "You need to come with us and mix monitors, because you know we were really digging what you were doing, and we were really getting into it. It was incredible." And to hear that sort of feedback from somebody you've never worked with them before, but you know, having that mental attitude of just go in, do the best that you can do. You know, it doesn't matter who it is. It could be one guy. It could be like a whole sea of people. But having that attitude, I think, helps. you know, when you're working not only at front of house but working at monitors. All right, at front of house you're kind of detached from the stage,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I like to think of monitors as being one of the most important jobs, because if the mixes aren't right, the band isn't comfortable. If the band aren't comfortable, they can't play out of their skin.
Yeah.
You know, they'll still play, but they won't try things that they might not normally do because they don't feel settled, you know.
Yeah.
And that then obviously projects to the front of house guys.
Mm-hmm.
Is if the guys play out of their skin on stage, then I wouldn't say it mixes itself, but you know, dynamically they can, you know, take care of it out there better, I would say. So that's just sort of 2 cents.
Great way to look at it. No, you're right, because I mean, I find that, or what's your approach when, you know, the bands come in? I mean, most of the bands we deal with obviously have got a touring engineer or monitors and stuff, and obviously we get a good relationship and have a laugh with them. But for those bands that come in and we're doing monitors and front of house, you know, the touring support or the local support, what's your approach to these musicians the minute they walk in the building?
Try and get a bit of rapport. Mm-hmm. Introduce myself, definitely. And, you know, sometimes it has been known that I'll offer them a cup of tea. You know, it's the small things. You know, you don't know how long they've been out. They could have been on the road for 8 hours. You know, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. So I think being the friendly face and not this stereotypical disgruntled but venue tech that hasn't been outside his own 4 walls.
Well, that's a funny thing. Sound engineers have got that stigma. People just think, oh, your sound engineer's a grumpy old git or not interested in the band. And it's funny, that's the engineers who you don't see doing big gigs.
Aye.
Or getting asked to do anything.
Yeah, so I think sort of dispelling with that whole kind of myth straight away and saying, no, I'm Andy, what can I get you? You know, we've got your spec here, is it? And then just checking over some details, you know, like it's like 3 mixes across the front and 1 for the drummer. Are you needing any side fills? We don't have side fills at this venue, thinking about the garage, but we could maybe stick up a couple of boxes at the side, wedges that we can mess about with just to give you some sense of having some kind of fill. But,
and most,
you know, so just being considerate, you know.
It's checking that the tech spec that you've actually been given from the promoter is current, which is what, 1 in 50 times maybe.
Well, this is from 1974. When did you get this? Who gave you this?
It says here you're a 4-piece band, but there's 20 of you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's because we've got the horn section. And did you get all the extra DIs? And yeah, it's funny because you said it earlier on. It's approaching every gig to do the best you can. And even if you're doing a small venue, say the Attic, you know, the bands that are coming in there, you treat them just exactly as the bands are playing Galvanizers or some of the SWG3. You know, they're all the same to me. And sometimes those smaller gigs are the ones that develop your techniques. You get something different coming through, but also if you treat them well, that's the ones that actually say, listen, we don't have an engineer. We don't have a monitor engineer. Can you come and do this gig? We haven't got any money to pay you, but can you come and do this one gig? Yeah, fine, we'll come do it. And I think that's how most of us have all got some sort of gig. I mean, I was doing Celtic Connections at St. Luke's a few of those days, and there was a few bands came through there, and I was talking to one of them, can't remember the name of them, they were great. And they remember doing a gig in, I think it was the Attic with Rudy.
Yeah.
They loved them, you know what I mean? So that just shows how well, if you just leave an impression on somebody, because they've done, 30, 40 gigs up and down the country. You know, and we've all had the engineer, or we've had bands that have came back into the garage and go, oh, I remember you. Or, you know, and that's like, well, that's a sign that you always remember the guys that do the good things for you, but we also remember the bad engineers as well.
Who was that? Who was that guy? That band? Was it the Ruts? Ruts DC Ruttles. But I'd worked with them in the academy. I did monitors for them in the academy, and they came to the garage. And as soon as they came in, I'd reintroduced myself and "Whoa, it's Andy, it's Andy." And the boys like, Billy, or whatever the guy's name was again, and he was like, Billy, this is Andy, remember for the academy. Oh, hi, how you doing? Straight away, and that's they're settled because they know that there's somebody that's behind the desk that they've worked with before. They've had a great gig.
They can relax.
They can relax,
Yeah. No, it's monitors is my favourite thing. Don't get me wrong, enjoy doing the big gigs out the front of the house and stuff like that. But just for people who don't know who you are a wee bit more, what venues are you currently or have been working in lately? What kind of bands have you been working with on a regular basis? And what kind of festivals you've been looking at in the last wee while?
Okay, so I was working in the academy, Military Academy down in Bridge Street, mostly as a monitor guy. Occasionally being pushed out off the stage and out to front of house. Then sort of parallel with that, working on the monitor side at the ABC before it burnt down. God rest it. And again, occasionally at front of house there as well. Two amazing venues. Obviously only one is there now. After the ABC went, we migrated to the garage, where I was mostly monitors again, occasionally front of house, but also doing a bit of sort of teching in terms of fixing things that were broken, because I do a wee bit of that as well. So that was pretty cool. Occasionally mixed the Barlands, St Luke's, Best WG3, so most of the venues in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And at one point or another, I've been in there, either at monitors or front of house. In terms of bands wise, working with what I'd mentioned earlier, Horse McDonald. I'd been working with her for donkey's years at front of house. I do front of house for Stanley Odd, the hip hop band. If you know them, very, very, very good people.
Uni mates.
What's that? Your uni mates. Ah,
yes.
Cool. And obviously, currently I am the monitor engineer for the Snuts, who are doing amazingly well.
Yeah, they're doing really well now.
We were supposed to be supporting Jerry Cinnamon at Hampden in July, and obviously that kind of went ta-ta with the COVID and all that. But
that would have been pretty immense.
Yeah, they're an amazing bunch of guys to work with. It's like everybody's really professional. That's the beautiful thing about it, and they've got a thirst and a hunger that they want to do well, and they're going to be even bigger than what they are now. Mm-hmm. And that's amazing. Really, really amazing.
And it's great you're in that opportunity where you're obviously, once we're back into gigging and stuff like that festivals and tours and stuff like that, when they're all back up and they're done.
Yeah.
In terms of when you're out with any of these guys, and also with the venues, obviously you've named nearly all the big venues in Glasgow. Now every single one of them has got a different monitor desk and a different front of house desk, and I think that's a lot of engineers or upcoming engineers don't realise that you have to learn all these, and they're all different. They're all different beasts, and we've all got our favourites. So, for instance, what we've got is like obviously the Academy was SD12s at front of house and monitors. St. Luke's Pro 2. Garage, what we've got, what is it? Pro 2, front of house, SD9 monitor. What was the ABC? Was it?
It was a VI1 at front of house,
right,
and an SC48 at Monitor World. But occasionally they would flip them round, and then we'd have to get a big old copper multi-core and run it.
Flipping
sort of round and mental.
And then we've got SWG3, which is a mixture really of Pro, but it's mostly Pro 2s now. It was SD11s and things like that. So it just shows, like, I remember my first gig on a Pro 2 was 7 or 8 years ago. But the only way you can really get to grips with it is by doing it. And I think a lot of engineers have got to realise is don't be afraid of doing it. But also, they've got to remember, if you're a visiting engineer, there's going to be a house guy there. You know, and I think a lot of people are like very afraid of saying, listen, I don't know how to work this desk. You know, whereas they don't realise how many times have we've done a gig and the guys have walked in and said, oh, I don't know how to work a Pro 2. Can you set it all up for me? Yeah, cool. We set it up because that's your job is. And then they're just writing the faders. There's nothing wrong with it. And I think a lot of engineers think, I've got to come in, oh, I know everything, it's cool. No, it's cool, it's all right to come in and go, actually, can you just give me some pointers, just set it all up?
I did that very same thing when I was out in tour with Atakat, pardon me, the Ghanaian guy. And we were, where were we? It was Sonar Festival. And they had an SSL L500 there. And of course, I was like, oh, Christ, it's an SSL. I've never touched an SSL before. But I did exactly the thing that you should do. And that is, don't be afraid to say to the guy, I've never used this. Would you mind hanging about? Just, you know, and just keep an eye out. Just tell me, you know, how to get to my auxes. And if there's anything crazy. Because most of these boards are all laid out now like an old analogue board. So you can kind of follow it. You know, they're all, I nearly said a sweary word there, trying to use an analogy, but I'll refrain from that. But, you know, you usually, you know, from top to bottom, you've got your gains, filters, blah, 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 all the way down. So it's just usual general quirks, you know. Yeah. But and he was happy. He was like, great, magic, I'll just stand here. And he's like, you know, if you need to get to EQ, there's various ways you can do it. You know, there's more than one way to skin a cat on a digital board, which is why we'll love some and we hate some, because some have got certain ways of doing things which are great, and other ones which have certain ways of doing things which are a pain in the backside. Cough, cough, patching screen in the Pro Series.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's it. They've all got their good things and they've all got their bad things. I mean, I remember a prime example of me turning up to a desk at last minute without knowing it was called in the last minute to look after monitors. Not monitors, sorry. Front of house at second stage doing the rabbit hole a few years back. And it was me and Will Blake. Oh, yeah. And it was a Roland, is it VI1?
The Soundcraft VI1.
Sorry, Soundcraft, sorry. And I'd never worked one before. And it took me a wee while to get my head around it, because you're just like, it comes down and then it goes along. You know, stuff like that just totally screwed with me. Don't get me wrong, but see, after doing, 20 or 30 bands over a few days, and then you had to visit engineers, that was a real test, because suddenly I learned a hell of a lot about it. Would I ever pick to use it? No. I didn't enjoy the desk. Would you?
Oh, aye. I love Soundcraft. The Soundcraft boards are incredible, I think.
I love analog Soundcraft, hence why I'm using one right now. But I don't know. I just couldn't get into it. And it's the same with, like, I love the SD series. I love SD, you know.
The digital guys.
I'm a digital guy, you yourself are, but I know a lot of guys who just don't like them. We can work them, or they can work them. Like Pro Series desks, yeah, I can work them and I like the sound of them. There's things I don't like, and if I could have the choice. So, what if you had free reign, right? And you were going on tour, what would be your go-to desk for front of house and monitors if they were different?
Money, no object.
Money's no objects, mate.
I don't know, XL4 at front of house.
Right?
Old analog.
Wow. I'm not carrying that.
What's that?
The crew would love you.
I know. Aye. Oh, my back.
It's going to embarrass.
If aye, up the middle. Yeah. I mean, if it had to be strictly from a digital domain, it would probably still be a Digico of some description. Most probably a 12. Although in saying that, the Yamaha Rivage stuff, like PM10, they are incredible. I did a gig in the academy with a boy who had brought one in. That might have only been one of two in Britain or something, but it was, what a desk and a half, and the sound of this thing was
I must say, it's one brand of desks I have never used as any Yamaha desks at all. I've just never had to use them or came across them, apart from being in Abu Dhabi last year. And then at the last second, they were like, listen, can you go around and just set up that desk for that small acoustic gig? And it was LS9.
LS9. Oh, yeah.
And I was quite excited because I was just like, I love a challenge of just turning up and going, because I know loads of people who have grown or learnt on an LS9 and so on. But for me, I was just like, all right, cool. And then I learned how to work it, absolutely fine. But then I was like, oh, that's just not a nice desk. You know, it's just bizarre.
There's like the LS9, the M7 CL, you know, and then you've got like the sort of studio kind of type ones like the O2R, O3D, O1V, all of those kind of things. They're all kind of cut from the same cloth, sort of thing. I mean, I've got an O2R right there. I love it.
Oh, so you do?
Absolutely. I really, really like it, and it's great for in here because it's 40 input, but a lot of the shortcuts and quirks that are even appearing on like the more modern Yamahas, like the CLs, they have inherited those from like O2Rs, you know, linking channels, hold down a select, tap the other select, that makes a pair, you know. Well, you know, auxes as well, you know, if you've got a selected channel, auxes, hold down one aux, tap the other.
You find that within a certain brand, you know, it's like the Pro Series or the Midas have got a certain things are all the same, and the Soundcraft and so on. And I find that I've started becoming a really big fan of the Alan Hay stuff. So I think definitely a D Live is where I'm probably going to go, because I love my SD9, but I feel like it's time to move on. You know, it's like a relationship, you know?
Yeah.
You're like,
so
I've used you.
That's kind of brings me on quite a nice link when you say Alan Heath there, in terms of a bad experience I had at monitors with one. That kind of put me off the Alan Heath boards for quite a while.
All right.
But that was just
desk.
D-Live.
All right. What happened?
So I was at a certain festival with a certain band, and the band that were on before us weren't using the D-Live. So the house monitor boy there was like, just load up your show file and carry on, sort of thing. So I was like, no worries. Loads up my show file. Spent a wee bit of time just making sure, feeling my way through it. And this is the first time I'd used this board. so working through it. And then it came to sound changeover. There was no talk to stage. So there was a whole host of fanning about. There was no comms to and fro. So I think they routed them all through the monitor board and then on and out sort of thing. So I was like, shit, what's going on? And obviously, we all are fucking about. We didn't really get a line check, so the band kind of had to go with it. And I was spent the whole time after it like, And that's the thing, though. It's like, that's a very, very good lesson in terms of, if you don't know the desk, ask again. Even if it means, if you've got a bit of time with the monitor guy to sit down and go, right, let's get this show file up, or you can use our show file that's already there, and we can just do the channels again,
I think definitely being in our kind of line of work, you have to work well under pressure. And if you can't work under pressure, you're in the wrong game.
Correct.
I mean, we've all done that. The promoter who puts a 6-band bill on and you've got a 5-minute changeover, that's ridiculous things. And it's like full drum kit changeovers and things, or the bands who don't check.
Wait till you do a gig with 2 left-handed drummers and they're not playing one after the other. That's a good one.
Whereas I always say, coming from a drummer's perspective, you should learn how to play left and right-handed. So if you're left-handed, you should play right-handed. You'd be a better drummer. But anyway, that's my view on it. So
that was front of house. But I would say, monitor desk-wise, I would always go with an SD series. But in saying that, I'm kind of quite getting into the CL, the Yamaha CL series. But I definitely think I would definitely love to take an SD out. A 12 or a 10.
I do like the 12 purely dual screen. For your mixes or for monitors, amazing. I love it. And that's why I love when I have been into the academy, I'm in my element, just happy as Larry, because there's only 2 venues that have got SD.
I think it's the power of the macro system for me.
Yeah.
In terms of doing tasks like, like writing a macro to reset the board with one push a button.
You went in a deep dive into that whole macro thing?
Yeah. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
I've really went deep into, because I've had tempo, or open graphics or things like that. But I've never went really into deep. But it's maybe a video we'll do in the future, and sitting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just like, the tap tempo thing. You open it up and it's there, and it's just one line in the macro window. But remember that there's a series of lines there, so you can start to put in different commands all the way down. So you could be like, reset all of the auxes to off, reset all of the auxes to, like 0, center all the faders.
Yeah.
You can keep going. You can keep anything that you can push, turn, twist, move, you can control from or command from the macro system, more or less.
I had, it came into my head, didn't you have a fun time with an SD9 and a pint at a gig lately, or last year?
Yes.
Where was that?
Are correct. So the Snuts were playing at the Spiegel tent in Paisley. Adlib were doing the PA. I think, if I remember right, it was wee Kieran.
Oh, Kieran saved your life, he said.
Aye, and Aaron was, both of those fine, upstanding gentlemen were there. And it was literally within the first 4 bars, a pint of cider came flying towards the monitor desk. Luckily, it was a plastic pint. And of course, it was literally just straight away, surface offline. towels. Of course, the band are still going. And, I'm getting looks for, like Joko at the drums, like, I need more snare. And I'm like, I can't do anything. The desk's covered in cider, kind of thing. So,
you're lucky it was cider. It could have been worse. You're lucky it was cider. It could have been worse.
It could have been worse. It was cold. That was the bonus.
All right.
That's when you know.
Do you know what? See, if it was my SD9 that happened, Dad, you just
freaked out.
It's different if you're on and it's somebody else's desk or it's hired in. You're just like, oh well. Whereas, I had that panic when I had the SD9 at Doon because there wasn't much protection, And in my head, I'm just like, man, if something comes over that, stuff it. Yeah. I had. Tell you what, my worst experience of a live gig with the SD9 was I was doing a Caird Hall in Dundee, and it was a big gospel gig. That's a few years back, and I'd adding on monitors and great setup. 14 in-ear mixes, and it was 52 channels, and it all went well. We had the Cara and great sound check. One of those days everything goes right, and you're just like, wow. And it was quite a big setup for a 40-piece choir as well, big gospel thing. And yes, we'd finished chilling out, chatting away to the lighting engineer, blah, blah, blah. And they're right, cool, that's us going. And they faded the lights. And at that moment, I suddenly realised, I haven't put out my gooseneck lights for the SD9. I'm like, oh, right, cool. So I just quickly go around and plug them in, but don't accidentally hit the engine reset as the guy's walking on stage with the mic. And it was one of those moments. The audio still played. Great, that's fine. But when the desk reset, all the channels had moved one. Yeah. All the input, don't know why, all the input channels had moved one. And I was like, I've got no option here but to load the scene, load it again. It wasn't too bad. The audio cut out for a split second, maybe. I noticed it, obviously, but it was one of those moments you're just like, you might think everything's going smooth until bingo.
Yeah.
Also remember a time where I accidentally dropped my talkback mic at TTF at Braehead Arena. And it wasn't TTF we were on at that point. It was one of the support, Snap or something like that. And we had the shout box, and I'm talking to who's in monitors, Kieran. And I said something, and the mic fell out my hand and smacked master mute. So for literally a split second, the whole PA just muted. But you've never seen my hands move as fast just to, these are the great stories, though. You laugh at them and go, you just don't tell them.
Oh, yes.
You just don't tell them back then. You just say something was wrong. Something went wrong.
I'll try to think of any that I've had, actually, recently. I've managed to escape it. Oh, no, wait a minute. I remember one at the academy. Was it Real Big Fish or something? It's one of those ones, like Mad Caddies or Bowling for Soup. Was it them? Sure it was. But they had a profile and monitors at that time. It had been hired in. And there's a two-step way of saving your show file on a profile. If memory serves right, you've got to overwrite the file, but then you've also got to save the show file, like the scene. So you save the scene,
and
then you save the show file, sort of thing. So I'd only saved the scene, and then went to load. I can't remember what it was. What was that? Did I reset something, thinking that's fine, it's all right, I'll load it back up, and of course, it hadn't saved. And that was at the end of the sound check. I was like, my desk's crashed. The boy was like, it's cool, we'll just do it again. It's fine. And I thought, fuck that.
Well, it's good you noticed it at that point and not the point where you're doing a changeover and the band are going back on stage.
It's one of those ones where I'd saved it or so I thought, and then thought, oh, wait a minute, I'll need to recall this because I think I need to do a... Where is it?
I think we've all witnessed it at some point, or we've done it. I've certainly seen it with some touring engineers and come in, or they do the old, oh, did you save it? And you go, no, why would I save it? Your desk and you're mixing.
I make a point of doing that whenever people were coming into the venue when I was on, because of that. I'll tell them to save it. We'll save it to the desk, and I'll take a copy as well, just to be super safe, because you never know. You never know.
You know? I mean, one of my favourite parts of the desk is setting up the DFA button, which or the DFA fader, or whatever you want to call it. Is it something that you use on a regular basis? Because I do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Especially for more band managers. You know that.
I remember at a festival once. Well, this is actually something completely different, but I'll tell it anyway because it's kind of related. So, band's on stage. I'm at Monitor World just doing what you do. And I thought, right, I need to get something out of my belly. So, as I'm over here, and I went like that to get something, and the singer went, and I went, oh shit. So I dropped what I was doing, went back to the board, and by the time I got my hands in the faders, they went, great magic. And I was like,
yeah,
I've not done anything.
Yeah. You know? I think it's a psychological thing.
Yeah. And it's like 9 out of 10 times you could unless they're really experienced, you can probably go, how's that? Is that any better? Oh yeah, aye. That's fine. You're standing there going, I'm not even watching it.
Yeah, I think it's, you get the musicians who, well, we've all had it, the bands that come in and the sound checks, one song, happy as Larry, and everything's nailed, and it's like, great. And then you get the ones who are just, you know, it takes ages and ages and ages. But yeah, you can be mucking about and not doing much. Who was it? I was doing monitors for Thingy Ramon. What was the drummer from Ramones?
Ronnie, DD.
Phil. It was last year in Main Hall Garage, and it was
yes, I remember that. Aye,
him and his backing band, who were all punks. And his drum tech came up to me at the start of the sound check, and he went, listen, do whatever he asks you to do, but see after it, put it back the way you want it. And I'd never had that before, because he was being really persnickety about gates, you know, and it was gate and everything, and I was fine. I did it all for him. It was just all the toms and everything, and he just wanted it all done specifically.
That's odd. I'll just, because I know a lot of drummers that don't like gates at all.
Well, most of the time when you're that drum wedge in the garage, you're really putting through kick, snare, and instruments. You don't really put the full kit. So, but he was wanting the toms and kick, and I spent, no joke, about half an hour just dialing it in until he was happy, perfect. And then started the gig. But it's not just gig, sorry, the sound check, but when he was sound checking, he was doing really soft taps, and he was doing some John Bonham stuff and really intricate jazzy things. Then when it came to sound check, it was punk, hard hitting, fast, non-stop, no dynamics. So none of that really mattered. And it just shows, I think it's either the mentality of the drummer just wants to say, hey, look, the musician wants to be a bit of focus on me, which is fine, because you want to give them that security and, yeah, just give them a hug. But then for somebody, the drum tech, to say, and then just put it back the way you want it, because really all he was doing was getting kick and snare through his monitor. And it's funny, but I think a lot of engineers have got to realise, see many musicians who come up, some of them are really nervous. And I think there's a lot of bands who you don't realise they might have made it big and they've got some big songs out, but they've not been gigging long, you know, or they've just became big, and they're doing gigs where they're not really experienced in it. So they do need the love and attention, and that's why a lot of time you just got to give that love to them. The DFA, I use loads of times for the bands who bring their manager, who's also a engineer, and we've all had the touring engineer manager who just wants to ride the fader. And I did it for a certain big rock band that came into the garage, old rockers, and the manager wanted to have control over certain aspects. And I set him up some faders that didn't do anything. He the one that I did give him charge of, he wanted a charge of the lead guitarist, so when his solos came, he could ride the fader. I'm fine with that, But it's the same with the...
Well, he knows where the solos are.
Aye, but then you get all the audience members, and everybody's a critic and everybody wants to mix, who come up and you just go, yeah, I'll just adjust that there. And I even, on the SD9, I've got on my show file DFA actually written in a fader. I've just realised, actually, for those who are listening to that who don't know what a DFA is, it means does F all. And it comes in very, very handy. You'd be amazed how many times the DFA can make things sound better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I've used it on a number of occasions.
So, in terms of sound check, we spoke about when bands come into the venue.
Mm-hmm.
What's your approach to sound check? And let's say from a front of house perspective, we've got people, I think a lot of us grew up with the way of start with a kick, snare, and so on. Whereas I've changed, and I think you're the same as me, I've changed to vocals first.
For years and years and years, I've always done vocals first.
Right.
Leave the vocal channels open. And then check around that.
Yeah, I only learned that a few years back. We were watching somebody chatting about it, and that's because I'm a drummer, or I come from a musician's background. So I grew up in the industry as when I was doing sound checks, was, right, give me a kick. And you're sitting there for ages.
Labelled left to right.
Yeah, so I was used to that. So when I became a sound engineer, I thought that's the way you did it. And then when I heard that technique of, no, do the vocal first and leaving the mic on, I went, that just makes so much more sense, because we've all done it. The sound check, start going, and it's just noise, and there's bleed coming through and so on.
Because it totally changes. It will affect. If you've got high gain in a lead vocal or BV mics, and then you go and the full band, the vocals check last, and then the full band comes in, that's going to disappear down those mics, isn't it? And then, unless you're using something like octal gates, which, not a big fan, but even then, when the mic's open and the full band's in, there's going to be a discernible rise of that coming down and into the mic, So it's like, I just always check in my mind anyway, it made sense to check the vocals first, because, all of those mics are open and focused most of the time. So
I think a lot of live sound engineers who haven't done gigs that are certain level, that aren't used to doing monitors in front of house. A lot of them are used to just doing front of house, and they're doing monitors in front of house, which, listen, that's where we all learnt from. And that can be so challenging depending on the band, because you're sharing the same gain. There'll be people listening to this who actually have got no experience on doing gigs with monitor engineers and front of house engineers. So you would just explain a wee bit more about the difference there on the benefits of having a front of house and a monitor engineer and how we approach it?
I think the most important thing is it's focusing on one task. If you're unlucky enough to be doing front of house and doing monitors from front of house, then 10 out of 10 times you'll be detached from the band. So you've kind of got to really be scanning the stage with your eyes and listening to the front of house with your ears, as you would do. I mean, that's a stupid statement, I must admit. Stupidly obvious. But because of that detachment, you might miss a cue from somebody saying, they want more of this and more of that, or you might glance down to make a front of house adjustment and then look back up and it's time for the next song, and you've missed a cue again. So it's just that focus of something, doing it and doing it right. And again, it's going back to that one job kind of thing. I don't understand, but I can kind of understand in a certain way how people even do tour management and driving and front of house. That would kill me. I can't do that. I just want to focus on one thing and do it well.
Aye.
Could be a money thing, I don't know, but it's just like, nah, I can't do that. I can't do that.
It's
taught myself that working probably.
For these young engineers, it's a great way of doing of coming up the ranks. The minute you start, I had a guy last year who had never done a monitors gig, and he was doing his first. And it was coming at me asking, how do you approach it? And it actually got me thinking for the first time of going, it is a completely different way, because you're doing it from front of house. You're just like, you think about front of house.
So
and then monitors is a side thing. You're concentrating on front of house.
So kind of going back to that then, switching across to monitor world and approaching it. So we kind of looked at sort of front of house there, and you're doing both. But if you're only doing front of house on its own, you're looking. If it's a smaller gig, you're trusting that the system's been set up right. Mm-hmm. It's been balanced. It's been taken to a reasonable sort of flatness, if you like. And then, talking about like 500-600 cap venues here, maybe, kind of medium, low medium sizes. And you're playing your tune through that well, your sound check tune, you're doing your wee bits of EQ and whatnot, and you're fine. While that's going on, if we flip to the monitor side of things, you've got the boxes down on stage. You've got them where you want them in terms of the stage plan. You've got side fills if they're there. You'll be going out and, ringing out those wedges, flattening them out, setting up your mixes, doing all that sort of stuff. If you're not touring with the band, then it's basically, this is where the more gigs you've done, the better. In terms of, because of the digital domain, you can save and recall files. So if you think, I had a great gig with such and such, and the monitor sound was great, and this is a similar band, so if you wanted to, you could call up what you did then.
Yeah.
You could take the EQ presets that you've had for the vocal, and this is where you start to build up a portfolio of show files on these things.
That you lose all the time.
That you use all the time. So when you get to a gig, if you're doing monitors for a festival or whatever, I'd be straight in there, importing my presets. You kind of get to know combinations of monitor boxes versus lead vocal mics in terms of EQs to a certain point. So you might EQ is at a 58 on an M4, great. You kind of know where you're going to start. That only comes through experience. But for the younger guys, they might be with a more experienced guy that would say, look, here's your stick. Right, there you go. If you ever come across, an M4 and a 58, use that initially and then work from there. It's all about saving time because, it is time is money in these things.
It's great. It's good if you're in the same venue all the time. Then
you get to know it.
You know the sound of it, like my SD9 show file in the garage for monitors. I've got show files that I can literally do a quick sound check because we've got that experience and because we've got it saved there. And it's funny the amount of bands sound engineers who've came through the venues who've not used a Pro 2 before or SD9, and you do all the gig, and then at the end you're like, listen, I'll save that for you. You just think, no, it's all right, I won't need it. And you're just like, there's a good chance you actually might turn up to another venue or come back into the venue.
I don't understand that. Maybe it's a kind of a pride thing, or I don't know. But I'd always take a copy of the show file. Always.
Yeah.
I've got tens of these things knocking about.
It's funny when you look through them and go, what the heck is that? And
yeah,
but they're always great for reference. I had one of my USBs broke when I was doing a gig, and I went to load it up, and it was one of those days where everything was running late and my gig wouldn't load up, and I was just like, in a Pro 2, it wouldn't load up, and I didn't have my default, and I didn't have my other backup USB, amateur stuff like that. And the Pro 2 is not exactly an easy desk to set up from scratch very quickly, or any of these desks like the SDs as well.
There's a lot of this is why I love the SD series so much. In terms of setup, if you really need to quickly set something up from scratch, using the option all, where you can hold it down,
high pass,
pull a fader, move it to 0, and the whole bucket moves with it. If you go into the compressor, option all, turn the threshold, every compressor in that bucket does the same thing. So anything in terms of EQ, positions, high pass, low pass filters, all of that option all. And I'm sure you can actually do it across the console. Somebody
they've just updated.
Put it down in the comments, as they say on YouTube.
They've just updated it, and I'm sure that's one of the features.
You can do it through layers and across back.
In terms of, we're talking about during gigs. Before a band turns up, when you turn up to a venue, obviously it's a venue we know. What's the difference if you turn up to a venue that you know, how you prepare before a band comes in, compared to you turn up, you're a touring engineer, you walk into a new venue, what's your first thing you do?
As a touring guy?
Yeah. Introduce that random venue that you've never heard of before.
Well, go and find my equivalent in the house team, and then ask them if they want a cup of tea.
If they're not late.
It's always about a cup of tea. It's always about a cup of tea, because it's like sometimes these guys, I wouldn't say they can be intimidated by touring guys, which is bollocks really at the end of the day, but you've never met them before, but that just something as simple as going, where's your kettle? Do you want a cup of tea? I'll put a brew on. And they're like, oh yeah, magic, it's down here. Come on, I'll show you. And immediately you start, everybody's at ease, and you start, talking.
You're also coming into someone else's domain, It's like, you're there as obviously you're getting paid, but you're there as a bit of a guest, and you've got to remember you're going to be there for the rest of the day with that person.
Yeah.
And if you piss them off straight away, and they go, fuck, that's it for the rest of the day, you're...
have I forgot to plug that in? Oh, sorry.
When you need something. It's, in terms of preparing for a band, a lot of time you get, obviously if you're touring with a band, you've got a set list, or you're working on the songs, you've done pre-production on them. But for touring support or local support, very often they'll give you a copy of their set list. Now, I used to be very much, oh, thanks very much. And then it just sat there, and didn't use it, because I was like, well, that was my old attitude. Whereas I suddenly learned that, again, putting them at ease, if you show interest in their set list, they go, oh, this guy's interested in us, then they feel a lot more at ease that this guy's going to look after us because he's shown interest. So say, oh, listen, so are any of these fast, slow? What kind of effects do you want any of these, or anything that I've got to watch out of that? So again, showing interest suddenly puts them going, oh, yeah, cool, this guy.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, like you say, it could be something like there's a really quiet bit in one of the tunes and they want some, like a lot of delay in verb in the wedge. Yeah, just tell me what tune it is. There it is.
It's also funny how they suddenly go and they go through the talking and go, oh wait, totally forgot to tell you, we've got a third guitarist that comes on for that tune, but it's not in the tech spec, and he won't be here until later on.
Yeah.
So
he's coming up to Liverpool.
Aye. So But if you know that, you go, no problem, because we can just line check it, da-da-da. Again, it spurs a conversation, and you have to check these things. It's the same with tech spec. You know, the minute the band are in, you're chatting away and go, cool, this is a copy of your tech spec from dated 2008. You know, you have a bit of banter with them because they just go, man, are they still giving that out? I just think I would encourage more bands to give out their set lists or talk about them a wee bit more. Too many of them just turn up. Some of them turn up with attitudes. What I've learned is if bands turn up with attitudes, you come back to them with the opposite of attitude.
Yeah.
An attitude of being grumpy and everything, you come back happy as Larry with them. And it's funny how that can actually reflect back and they change their mood and it changes the mood for the day. And
I've had it where it didn't make a difference.
oh, yeah. And it's funny because
a band with a drum rug. Venue didn't have a drum rug.
Oh, aye.
And then it was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. And then I was like, right, let's do the gig kind of thing. You know, it was like inside, I was like, ah!
It's amazing the amount of bands who tour without things like that, like a drum rug.
It's like turning up without sticks.
Aye. Have you got a plectrum?
Aye. Get a guitar cable. Mental.
One thing I was wanting to ask, and I want to get this from a lot of engineers, is the subject of what's in your pelly. Is there anything that you would recommend to those guys who are going to get a pelly, for the guys who are just going to do regular gigs, to those who are going on tour? You know,
I'm just going to open it and then show you a couple of things.
It's been a while, aye?
Play a tune.
Oh, yes.
An AJ.
It's for hitting people with.
Yeah. Like this guy.
What's that?
So what that does is checks for live voltages and cables.
That's cool.
So if you're not sure, multimeter.
That's nice and compact.
Compact one. Right.
Yes.
Dusting.
Yeah. In case you want to do a wee bit of painting in between sets, you know.
Do like the Tutankhamun comedy vibes. Also got a measurement mic.
Yes.
And a calibrator.
Oh, that's a bit fancy.
It is a bit fancy. You don't need to get one of them, by the way.
In an ideal world, you would have a spare of everything in your pelly, but
yeah. I mean, there's like NL4 barrels as well that I've got in there. An audio interface, that's another good one. Like a kind of one of these guys.
Yep. Do you use that with your measuring mic and stuff?
Yeah, and it's good for sort of playback, or if you want to take a 2-track recording. Mm-hmm. If you're not really bothered about that kind of thing as well. So, all manners of bodgers, you know, RCA to quarter inch to XLRs, XLRs to 3.5 mils, gender changers, male to female XLRs, toilet paper, couple of rolls of Lumo gaff.
Thank you for sharing your pelly.
Oh.
Very private thing.
Actually.
The one thing we haven't discussed is, obviously we're all in a situation of COVID at the moment, but I don't want to talk about that, but in a post-COVID situation, of how do you see any differences of how we're going to approach gigs? And I mean actually how the gigs happen, because obviously you did the Snuts drive-in gig, didn't you?
No, it was the Snuts, but it was the Newcastle Virgin Money Arena.
So that was a different thing. How was that different to a normal gig, of how you had to set up and stuff like that? The changeover.
So for a start, front of house wasn't where it normally is. It was off to the side.
Why was that?
Well, you think about trying to squeeze as many bums on seats into the venue, right? If you've got like an 8 or like an 8-metre square or 4-metre square or whatever it is in front of house in the middle of all of this, then that's taking away X amount of people.
Yeah.
So what they decided to do is move it off to the side, and then they had the massive square or rectangle filled with little pods, shall we say, and the pods are made up of a bike rack.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this sort of bike rack fence. So it was like a U shape, and they were spaced out in terms of we had one U shape, and then a gap, and then obviously another U shape and then a gap. But the spacing of that was equidistant in terms of what the U's were. So it was just like if you put out a load of U's, they went, right, we'll put one across there, leave that one free, put one across there, leave that one free, put one across there. So all these U's. So that was sort of out front wise. Stage side, nothing really changed in terms of the way it normally is, but there would be lots and lots and lots of hand sanitizer and masks.
Can you imagine?
And certain one-way systems in terms of you come on the stage that way, you go off that way.
Wow.
You come back round and you go on that way, you come off that way. So in terms of a festival gig where you've got the space to do that, great, magic. But if you think about some of the local venues that we've both been in, that could prove a little bit difficult in terms of moving things about. But then again, what we know about it now, you could, as long as you're always, maintaining social distancing and all that kind of malarkey.
Obviously, the band all had their own gear, own microphones, own stands. Yeah.
On microphones.
Yeah. I think
only our crew were allowed to touch gear.
So that's definitely going to be a big thing, because whereas you'd normally at the end of a gig or changeover, you get crew on, like local crew and stuff, to all hands on deck, But
I mean, it's different at festivals when you've got risers, when you can build it in a riser and stack everything in the riser that you need, and then the local crew can help you manoeuvre that out. And then we would take over by positioning the amps, miking up, cabling, that kind of thing.
I think what we'll see, the changes to the venues and stuff like that, and touring acts for the garage, is I think every band will probably be touring with their own mics now. I can see that, because I was quite shocked about the amount of bands who didn't tour with their own mics or even their own vocal mic. I was like, man, the amount of bands, big touring acts who just use the venue's mics. I'm like, man, even I've got my own talkback mic. I don't even let anyone else use my talkback mic, So I think, that's what we're going to see, is bands touring with their own mics, maybe mic stands as well, because obviously if we're doing changeover, they would all have to be cleaned down, or we're going to have, as a venue, need to have double the amount of stands and double the amount of cables again, because I don't think we'll be allowed to share, or
unless they've been properly wiped down.
But can you imagine trying to do that in between changeover? It's like
be one extra person that could follow on behind. Just
actually, I just TV. What have you been doing for the last 6 months? Well, I've just been cleaning microphones in between hands and stuff, and cleaning. Yeah, I wonder if there'll be a ban on bands throwing out stuff out the crowd as well. Like throwing out their towel or throwing out a bottle, or the punk bands who, I remember that Ramones gig, and the bassist just right beside Monitor World just kept on turning around spitting every 2 seconds, and he was literally half a metre away from me, and I was just standing going,
Well,
I hate
Ian,
that.
Mr. Smith will tell you about the Scotland Calling gigs, which were, the punk gigs. Tremendous.
Are they
I
ABC?
remember one guy in particular, and he was spitting and salivating all over the place, and he's yakking his head with a 58, and after it I was like that, watching it drip out. It's almost like dunked it in some water. It's mental. So that would be no.
I remember when we were doing Cuban Brothers. Remember you did
Yes.
that gig?
Yeah, that's right, at Kelvin Grove.
And they had our radio mics, and nobody told me that they put the radio mics down his pants. And running about with the radio mics hanging out his boxers and stuff like that. I'm like, nobody told me these things.
They're good guys, actually. Really good guys.
But it'll be interesting. I mean, we're also going to get past COVID, and we'll get back to it. But I think there's definitely going to be a shift on how gigs happen from our perspective, from a technical aspect. And I wonder, would that be amazing if promoters decide to not put on 5 or 6 band bills? It might be cutting that back so we can have more time changeover, because we're going to have to more cleaning, and it's a bit strange though, if you're doing a one-man gig where you're doing front house and monitors and you're doing a changeover, but you've got to clean everything as well at the same time. It's going to change how we do our gigs. But we'll wait and see.
Definitely.
Man, that's been good. It's been a good chat.
Yes, indeed.
Really appreciate your time and for taking your wisdom and sharing it with us. I want to thank Andy for his time this evening, and thank you for listening. Please remember to subscribe and be notified when the next interview is up. Thanks very much.